The digital clock beside Emma's bed cast a pale blue glow across the ceiling as it clicked. From 2:59 to 3 a.m., she had been lying there for 20 minutes, listening to the familiar sounds of their small house settling into the deep quiet of night. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen downstairs. The old radiator in the hallway made its occasional clicking noise. And then, right on schedule, came the soft whisper of sock-covered feet on hardwood. Emma's eyes were already adjusted to the darkness when her bedroom door opened just wide enough for a small figure to slip through. 7-year-old Ruby stood in the doorway, clutching her worn stuffed elephant, the one with the faded purple ears that had been her constant companion since she was 2. Emma watched through barely opened eyelids as her daughter paused there, as she did every night, seemingly checking to make sure her mother was truly asleep. This had been happening for exactly 4 weeks now, though Emma had only started counting after the first week when she realized it wasn't just a few random occurrences. Every single night, Ruby would appear at her bedside sometime between 2:45 and 3:15 a.m., moving with the careful precision of someone who had learned exactly which floorboards creaked and how to avoid them. Emma had perfected her sleeping act. Over these past weeks, she would keep her breathing deep and steady, occasionally shifting slightly the way people do in natural sleep, but never enough to suggest she was awake. If Ruby suspected her mother was conscious, she would whisper, barely audible, "Sorry, Mama," and retreat to her own room. But if Emma's performance was convincing, Ruby would make her careful approach to the bed. Tonight was no different. Ruby stood beside the bed for almost a full minute, and Emma could hear her daughter's quiet breathing in the darkness. As she did every night, what was going through Ruby's mind during these moments of hesitation? Was she debating whether to stay or go? Was she making sure she wouldn't disturb her mother's sleep? Or was she simply gathering the courage to claim the comfort she needed? And the mattress dipped slightly as Ruby climbed up, moving with practiced stealth. She never bounced or climbed roughly the way she might during daytime play. Instead, she moved like she was participating in some sacred ritual, treating the moment with reverence and care. Emma felt the familiar warmth as Ruby settled against her side. Fitting perfectly in the space between Emma's arm and ribs, her stuffed elephant tucked securely between them. This positioning never varied. Ruby always chose the same spot, always. Faced the same direction, always arranged herself in exactly the same way. Within minutes, Emma could hear her daughter's breathing shift into the deeper rhythm of sleep, and Ruby's small body would relax completely against her mother's warmth. The first time this had happened, Emma had been startled awake by the unexpected presence in her bed. Her initial instinct had been to gently wake Ruby and guide her back to her own room, the way parenting books and well-meaning relatives had always advised. But something about the peaceful way Ruby had settled beside her, something about the obvious comfort it brought her daughter, had made Emma hesitate. Instead of waking her, Emma had simply adjusted her position slightly to make them both more comfortable and had fallen back to sleep with Ruby curled against her. The next morning, Ruby had awakened in her own bed as usual, with no memory or mention of her midnight journey. Emma had wondered if she had dreamed the whole thing, the slight indentation in the mattress beside her and the lingering scent of Ruby's strawberry. Shampoo on the pillow had confirmed that it had really happened. When it happened again the following night, Emma had realized this wasn't a random occurrence. By the end of the first week, she understood that Ruby had developed a need for this nighttime comfort, and Emma found herself looking forward to these quiet moments almost as much as her daughter seemed to need them. Now, as Ruby's breathing settled into sleep beside her, Emma allowed herself to finally relax. Tomorrow would bring its usual challenges, work deadlines, school pickup, homework, battles, and the dozens of small decisions that filled their days. But for now, in the soft darkness of her bedroom, with Ruby safe and peaceful beside her, everything felt exactly right. The house that had felt too quiet and empty these past few months now felt warm and complete. Emma closed her eyes and let herself drift towards sleep, knowing that in a few hours, Ruby would somehow slip away as silently as she had arrived, returning to her own room before the morning alarm sounded. The morning alarm buzzed at 6:30 a.m., just as it had every weekday for the past month. Emma reached over to silence it, her hand brushing across the empty space where Ruby had been sleeping just hours before. The sheets were cool now, with only the faintest impression in the pillow to suggest her daughter had ever been there. "Good morning, sunshine?" Ruby's cheerful voice called from the hallway, followed by the sound of her feet thundering down the stairs. Emma smiled despite her grogginess. It never ceased to amaze her how Ruby could transform from the quiet, vulnerable child who sought comfort in the night to this bundle of energy, who bounded through their morning routine by the time Emma made it to the kitchen. Ruby was already at the table, still in her pajamas, but with her hair somehow perfectly tousled in that effortless way only children could achieve. She had arranged her cereal bowl, spoon, and cup of orange juice with the same precision she used. For her midnight visits, "Can we have pancakes this weekend?" Ruby asked, taking a large bite of her cereal, the kind with the chocolate chips that look like little smiles. "We'll see," Emma replied, pouring coffee into her favorite mug, the one with the chip on the handle that she kept meaning to replace, but couldn't bring herself to throw away. She watched Ruby eat, looking for any signs of tiredness or the emotional weight that might explain her nighttime behavior. But Ruby looked bright-eyed and alert, chattering about her plans for art class and whether she should wear her red sweater or her blue one to school. At school pickup that afternoon, Emma lingered near the playground, watching Ruby interact with her classmates. Her daughter was animated and confident, organizing an impromptu game of tag and laughing freely when one of her friends told a silly joke. Mrs. Patterson, Ruby's teacher, approached Emma with her usual warm smile. "Ruby's doing wonderfully this semester," she said, adjusting the colorful scarf around her neck. "She's been participating more in class discussions, and her reading comprehension scores have improved significantly. Whatever you're doing at home, keep it up." Emma felt a flutter of confusion mixed with relief, as she seemed, tired at all? Or anxious about anything? Mrs. Patterson tilted her head thoughtfully. "Not that I've noticed. She seems very well rested, actually, and she's made several new friends. Just yesterday she helped Tommy with his math worksheet without being asked. She's developing into quite the little helper." That evening, Emma's sister Grace called during dinner preparation. Ruby was in the living room, sprawled on the carpet with her homework spread around her, working on a worksheet about animal habitats with intense concentration. "How are you both adjusting?" Grace asked, her voice carrying that careful tone people used when they wanted to check on your emotional well-being without being too direct about it. "We're doing okay," Emma replied, lowering her voice and moving toward the kitchen window. "Ruby seems to be handling everything really well. Better than I expected, honestly." "That's good to hear. Kids are resilient, you know. But if you notice any changes in her behavior, trouble sleeping, clinginess, regression, those can be normal responses to family transitions." Emma glanced toward the living room where Ruby was now lying on her stomach, feet kicked up in the air, completely absorbed in her homework. "Actually, there is one thing. She's been coming to my room at night. Not every night," Emma lied instinctively, "but sometimes. She doesn't wake me up or anything, just ... appears." "Oh, that's totally normal," Grace said with the confidence of someone who had raised 3 children of her own. "After everything you've both been through, it makes sense she'd want extra comfort. You might want to address it, though, before it becomes too much of a habit. Maybe a reward chart for staying in her own bed, or some new nightlights to make her room feel more secure?" "Maybe," Emma murmured, watching Ruby flip to a new page in her workbook. "The important thing is not to make her feel bad about it. But you also don't want to encourage dependency. It's a delicate balance." After they hung up, Emma found herself observing Ruby even more carefully during their evening routine. Her daughter brushed her teeth with her usual thoroughness, picked out her clothes for the next day, and climbed into her own bed without any signs of reluctance or anxiety. She seemed genuinely content in her room with its carefully arranged collection of books, art supplies, and stuffed animals. "Sweet dreams, baby," Emma said, tucking the covers around Ruby's shoulders. "Sweet dreams, Mama. I love you to the moon and back. I love you to the moon and back, and all the way around again." It was their ritual phrase, one they'd been saying since Ruby was old enough to understand the concept of love being measureless. Ruby smiled and closed her eyes, looking perfectly peaceful and ready for sleep. Emma went to her own room and prepared for bed. Brushing her teeth and changing into her pajamas while her mind churned with questions, Grace's advice made logical sense, and Mrs. Patterson's observations suggested Ruby was thriving. So why did Emma feel so uncertain about disrupting something that seemed to be working? She settled into bed with a book, but found herself reading the same paragraph over and over, her attention focused on listening for the familiar sounds that would signal Ruby's approach. Part of her hoped Ruby would skip tonight, that maybe she was naturally outgrowing this need for nighttime comfort. But another part of her, a part she wasn't entirely comfortable acknowledging, looked forward to those quiet moments of connection. At 3:07 a.m., Emma heard the soft creak of her bedroom door opening, and she felt a familiar mixture of concern and contentment wash over her. Emma had been staring at her laptop screen for 20 minutes, the cursor blinking mockingly at the end of an unfinished email. She was supposed to be working on quarterly reports, but instead she found herself typing search phrases into a new browser tab. Child sleeping with parent after divorce. 7-year-old needs comfort at night. How long is too long co-sleeping? The results were overwhelming and contradictory. Some articles warned about creating unhealthy dependencies and disrupting natural sleep development. Others celebrated the healing power of responsive parenting and meeting children's emotional needs. Every expert seemed to have a different opinion, and none of them knew Ruby personally. Her phone buzzed with a text from her ex-husband. Mark picking up Ruby at 6 for dinner. How's she adjusting to everything? Emma stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. She's doing great. Happy and healthy. She deleted the part where she had started to mention the midnight visits. Mark had opinions about parenting, boundaries, and she wasn't ready for that conversation. When Ruby came home that evening, she was full of stories about dinner at her father's new apartment. He has a really cool view of the park, she said, hanging her jacket carefully on the hook by the door. And he made grilled cheese with 3 different kinds of cheese. But I told him yours are still better because you cut them into triangles. Emma smiled, helping Ruby with her backpack. Did you have fun? Yeah, but I missed you. His place is nice, but it doesn't smell like home, and the walls are too white. Our house has better colors. That night, Emma decided she was definitely going to have the conversation she'd been avoiding. She sat on the edge of Ruby's bed as her daughter arranged her stuffed animals in their preferred sleeping positions. Ruby, honey, can I ask you something? Sure, Mama. Emma took a deep breath. How have you been sleeping lately? I mean, do you ever have trouble staying asleep or bad dreams or anything like that? Ruby looked up from adjusting her elephants. Position her expression genuinely puzzled. I sleep good. Why? Well, sometimes when families go through changes, kids might feel worried at nighttime or need extra comfort. And that's totally okay if you do. I'm not worried, Ruby said matter-of-factly. I like my room. It has all my favorite things in it. Emma felt her carefully planned words dissolving. Ruby seemed completely sincere, showing no signs of guilt or defensiveness. There was no indication that she was even aware of her nighttime journeys. That's good, sweetie. I just want to make sure you feel safe and comfortable. Is there anything that would make your room even better? Maybe some new decorations or a different nightlight? Could we get one of those projectors that make stars on the ceiling? Tommy has one, and it's really cool. Of course we can look at that, Ruby beamed, and settled under her covers. Thanks, Mama. I love you. I love you too, baby. Emma left Ruby's room feeling more confused than ever. Was her daughter genuinely unaware of her midnight visits? Is it some kind of sleepwalking? Or was Ruby simply so comfortable with the routine that it didn't register as unusual or worth mentioning? The next day, Emma found herself calling the school counselor, Janet Morrison, during her lunch break. Janet had been helpful during the initial transition period, offering resources and checking in on Ruby's adjustment. Emma, how nice to hear from you, Janet said warmly. How are things going at home? Mostly well. Ruby seems to be adapting. Better than I expected. But I wanted to run something by you. Emma explained the midnight visits, describing Ruby's stealth and routine, her apparent lack of awareness during the day, and Emma's uncertainty about how to respond. That's actually not uncommon, Janet said thoughtfully. Children often find their own ways to cope with stress or change, and sometimes those coping mechanisms can look unusual to adults. The fact that Ruby seems happy and well-adjusted during the day is a positive sign. How are you feeling about these visits? Emma paused, considering the question honestly. Conflicted. Part of me worries I should be encouraging more independence. But part of me, ... Well, part of me thinks maybe she needs this right now, and maybe I do too. That's very insightful. Sometimes our instincts as parents are more reliable than conventional wisdom. Is Ruby's behavior concerning you because it's actually causing problems, or because you feel like it should be concerning you? The question hit Emma like a gentle revelation. I think it's the second one, she admitted. Everyone keeps telling me what I should do, but Ruby seems genuinely fine. Maybe even better than fine. Trust yourself, Emma. You know your daughter better than anyone else. If this arrangement is working for both of you and isn't causing any actual problems, there's no rule that says you have to fix it. Sometimes, healing doesn't look the way we expect it to. That night, as Emma settled into bed, she felt something shift in her perspective. Instead of lying there filled with worry and second-guessing, she found herself simply waiting peacefully for Ruby's arrival. When the familiar creak of the door came at 2:52 a.m., Emma didn't pretend to be asleep. Instead, she lifted the covers welcomingly as Ruby approached. "Hi, Mama," Ruby whispered, climbing into bed with her elephant. "Hi, baby," Emma whispered back, wrapping her arms around her daughter. For the first time in weeks, Emma fell asleep. Without analyzing or questioning their arrangement, sometimes she realized. Love looked like letting go of what other people thought was right and trusting what felt right for your own family. 3 weeks had passed since Emma's conversation with Janet, and she had begun to notice patterns she hadn't seen before. Ruby's midnight visits weren't random or chaotic. They followed a distinct rhythm that seemed connected to the events of their daily life. After particularly busy days at school, or when there had been any mention of her father's new living situation, or even after exciting events like birthday parties or field trips, Ruby would arrive a few minutes earlier and settle more deeply. Against Emma's side, on quieter days, days filled with routine and predictability, Ruby's approach would be more casual, sometimes even sleeping for only an hour before returning to her own bed. Emma had started to see these visits as a kind of emotional regulation, Ruby's way of processing the day's experiences and preparing for tomorrow's challenges. The revelation came through an unexpected conversation with their neighbor, Nora Fitzgerald, an 82-year-old woman who had lived next door for over 30 years. Emma had been bringing in groceries when Nora appeared on her front porch, wrapped in a colorful shawl and carrying a plate of homemade cookies. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion, dear," Nora said, her eyes twinkling behind wire-rimmed glasses. "I made too many snickerdoodles again, and I remembered how Ruby loved them last time." Emma accepted the cookies gratefully and found herself lingering on the porch despite the October chill. There was something calming about Nora's presence, a wisdom that came from decades of observing life unfold in all its messy, beautiful complexity. "How are you both adjusting to your new normal?" Nora asked gently, settling into one of Emma's porch chairs as if she'd been invited to stay. Emma surprised herself by being completely honest. She told Nora about Ruby's midnight visits, about the conflicting advice she'd received, about her own confusion over whether to address the behavior or allow it to continue. Nora listened without interruption, nodding occasionally with understanding. When Emma finished, the older woman was quiet for a moment, watching leaves drift down from the maple tree in Emma's front yard. "You know," Nora said finally, "when my children were young, we lived through some difficult times. My husband was deployed overseas for 18 months when our youngest Michael was about Ruby's age. Michael developed his own way of coping. He would build elaborate blanket forts in the living room every evening and insist on sleeping there. Not in our bedroom, mind you, but close enough to hear us moving around the house." She paused, pulling her shawl tighter. "Everyone had opinions about that, too. Said I should make him sleep in his own bed, that I was enabling anxiety or creating bad habits. But Michael needed those forts. They were his way of feeling safe when the world felt uncertain. After his father came home and our family found its new rhythm, the forts gradually disappeared on their own." Emma felt something click into place. "How long did it take?" "About 8 months, I think. One day, I realized he hadn't built a fort in over a week." Then it became occasional, then just for special occasions, like when friends came for sleepovers. Eventually, he didn't need them anymore, but by then, they had served their purpose. They had helped him feel secure during a time when security was hard to come by. That afternoon, Emma watched Ruby with new eyes. Her daughter was sitting at the kitchen table, working on an art project with intense focus. She had arranged her supplies in a specific order, crayons lined up by color. Paper positioned just so, scissors and glue placed within easy reach. The same careful precision she used for her midnight journeys was evident in everything she did. "What are you making, sweetie?" Emma asked, settling into the chair beside her. "It's a picture of our house," Ruby said, not looking up from her careful coloring. "See, here's your bedroom window, and here's mine. And this is the hallway between them." Emma studied the drawing. Ruby had included remarkable detail, the small rug in the hallway, pictures on the walls, even the squeaky floorboard that Ruby carefully avoided during her nighttime travels. But what struck Emma most was how Ruby had drawn the two bedrooms. They weren't separate spaces, but connected by a golden line that flowed from one room to the other. "That's a beautiful drawing," Emma said softly. "It's not finished yet," Ruby replied. "I want to add more colors to make it perfect." Later that evening, Emma ran into Tommy's mother, Karen, at the grocery store. Their boys had become good friends, often playing together after school. "Ruby is such a sweet kid," Karen mentioned, as they waited in the checkout line. "Tommy really looks up to her. She helped him with his reading homework yesterday when she came over to play. Very mature for her age. She's always been nurturing." Emma agreed, though she found herself wondering if Ruby's increased helpfulness and maturity were connected to her need for nighttime comfort. Perhaps taking care of others during the day was another way of processing her own need to be taken care of at night. That night, as Emma prepared for bed, she made a conscious decision to stop analyzing and simply accept. 3:04 a.m., Emma welcomed her without reservation. As her daughter settled against her side, Emma whispered, "I love you, Ruby." "I love you too, Mama," Ruby whispered back. "Thank you for keeping me safe." Emma realized then that Ruby was completely aware of their nighttime arrangement. She understood exactly what she needed and why she needed it. The pretense of sleep, the careful timing, the ritual precision, it was all Ruby's way of asking for comfort while maintaining her dignity and independence during the day. For the first time since this had all began, Emma fell asleep without any worry or doubt. Her daughter was finding her own way through a difficult time, and Emma's job was simply to be present, to provide the safety and comfort Ruby needed while she figured out how to be brave in a world that had recently shifted around her. By February, Emma had stopped counting the nights. Ruby's visits had become as natural and unremarkable as any other part of their routine: brushing teeth, reading bedtime stories, sharing quiet moments in the dark when the rest of the world was asleep. What had once felt like a problem to be solved now simply felt like love in action. The changes came gradually, so slowly that Emma almost didn't notice them at first. Ruby began sleeping through the night in her own bed once or twice a week, usually after particularly good days when she felt especially confident and secure. Then it became 3 nights a week, then 4. The visits didn't stop abruptly, but they shifted from being a desperate need to being a comfortable choice. Spring brought other changes too. Ruby had grown taller, her legs now hanging over the edge of Emma's bed in a way that made their midnight arrangements slightly less comfortable. She had developed new friendships at school, joined the after-school art club, and started talking excitedly about summer plans. Confident, capable. A child who had emerged during the day was gradually becoming consistent around the clock. Mama Ruby said one evening, as Emma tucked her into her own bed, "I think my room feels really cozy now. I like all the new decorations we added." They had indeed made several improvements over the past months. The star projector Ruby had requested some new artwork for the walls, a reading corner with soft cushions and a small lamp. But Emma suspected the room's increased comfort had less to do with the decorations, and more to do with Ruby's increased comfort with herself and their new family structure. "Glad you like it, sweetie. Sweet dreams, Mama. I love you to the moon and back. I love you to the moon and back, and all the way around again." That night, Ruby didn't appear in Emma's doorway. Nor the next night or the night after that. Emma found herself missing the warm presence beside her, but she also felt proud of Ruby's growing independence. When Ruby did visit on the fourth night, it felt different, less urgent, more like a choice made from love rather than need. "Missed sleeping next to you," Ruby whispered as she settled under the covers. "I missed it too," Emma admitted. "But I love that you're feeling comfortable in your own room now." "I like both," Ruby said simply. "Sometimes I want to sleep in my room with all my stuffed animals, and sometimes I want to sleep here with you. Is that okay?" "That's perfectly okay." By summer, Ruby's visits had become occasional treats rather than nightly necessities. She might appear after a nightmare, or when she wasn't feeling well, or sometimes just because she wanted extra snuggles. Emma had learned to read the signs. Ruby would linger a little longer at bedtime or mention feeling extra loving toward her mother, and Emma would know that a midnight visit might be coming. The transformation wasn't just in Ruby. Emma had grown too, learning to trust her instincts and ignore well-meaning advice that didn't fit their situation. She had discovered that sometimes the best parenting looked different from what the books described, and that healing rarely followed a prescribed timeline or process. One evening, in late August, almost a year after the midnight visits had begun, Emma found Ruby reading in her room before bedtime. Her daughter was curled up in the reading corner they had created, completely absorbed in a chapter book about a girl who befriends a dragon. "Good book?" Emma asked. "Really good. It's about someone who seems scary but is actually just lonely, and about how sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask for help when you need it." Emma smiled at the inadvertent wisdom. "That sounds like a very smart book," Mama Ruby said, looking up from her pages. "Thank you for letting me come to your room when I needed to. I know you could have said no, but you didn't, and it helped me feel brave during the day." Emma felt her heart catch. "How did you know?" "I was awake," Ruby grinned. "I always knew. You're not as good at pretending to sleep as you think you are. But I also knew you were letting me come because you understood I needed it. That made me feel really loved." That night, Ruby slept peacefully. In her own room, surrounded by her books and art projects and the comfortable familiarity of her own space. Emma lay in her bed, no longer waiting or wondering, but simply grateful for the journey they had traveled together. Sometimes love looked like setting boundaries. Sometimes it looked like enforcing independence. But sometimes, Emma had learned, love looked like making room in your bed and your heart for whatever your child needed, trusting that they would grow into their own strength when they were ready. The midnight visits still happened occasionally, but now they felt like gifts rather than concerns. Moments of connection that reminded both mother and daughter that needing each other wasn't weakness, it was simply human. And growing up didn't mean growing apart. It meant learning to choose love and comfort consciously rather than desperately. In the quiet of her bedroom, Emma smiled and closed her eyes, knowing that whatever tomorrow brought, they had figured out how to be brave together.